A huge welcome to you if you're new, if it's your first time here, or whether it's your 100th time here, or maybe more. It's lovely to have you here this morning. Matt's kind of already hinted at it, but today I just want to look at the concept of what it means to come home. You know, the Christian faith is a homecoming faith. It's the story of our souls coming home to find restoration and belonging and peace in Jesus, of being where we belong. So I want to think about what does it mean to come home. Just this week, literally, before I'd even kind of started to think about this talk, but I had this really, really vivid dream this week. And I won't label you through the whole dream, because sometimes when people share dreams, it can be a bit boring, can't it? But let me just tell you in briefly my dream. And I was trying to walk up this hill to my old childhood home. And it was very vivid and real. It was like the actual hill to my childhood home, which, you know, we don't have. 20 years ago, we sold that now. But, you know, I could kind of remember every detail of it. And I was on this hill trying to get home. And yet I kept getting interrupted and delayed. And however hard I wanted to get up this hill and go into my old childhood home, I just couldn't get up the hill. All these interruptions came in. And then when I kind of woke up from the dream, I just had this like deep longing in my heart, this deep sense of longing for home. I think many people in this room will have experienced this kind of longing at some point in your life. It's deeply powerful, isn't it? Maybe you're here this morning and you have that deep longing for home. You know, I know in our church family right here this morning, there's people who've come to Cardiff for their own safety, leaving family, leaving homes behind in a different country, a different part of the world. I can't even imagine how deep the longing for home must be at times for you. But this longing for home, it's part of the human condition. It's part of the human experience that we have this longing for home. There's no good English word for it, but there is a good Welsh word for it. Hiraeth, a longing for a place you know you belong to. And that's what home represents, doesn't it? It's a place where you're safe, where you know you are loved, where you know you belong. Psychologists will tell you there are 4 deep human needs that every human being has: belonging, significance, acceptance, and love. And home represents the place where you can find these things, hence why this kind of searching for home is a universal experience and why it's such a powerful one. Belonging, significance, acceptance, and love. You might have heard of an artist, a guy called Charlie Mackesy. He's a man who loves Jesus deeply. He wrote and illustrated this book a few years ago that just kind of went like across the world. The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And he captures in this book this universal longing for home. He does it beautifully with this image. "I think everyone is just trying to get home," said the mole. Maybe you have that sense here this morning. You know, however hard we might try in life, however successful we might be, even if you have a lovely home to live in, many of us just can experience that feeling like we're just trying to get home. Maybe it's like a spiritual homesickness, a deep unrest in your soul. You're trying to get home, but maybe you're not really sure what that home even looks like. And the good news of the gospel is that Jesus is the way home. That our life lived with him is where we find our belonging, our significance, our acceptance, and our love. And the gospel message is that one day he will call us home to live with him for all eternity. Now, I didn't grow up in a Christian home, but we did used to go to church because my mum loved the idea of some free childcare on a Sunday morning. And those were in the days where no one asked. You could just drop the kids off she'd go home, probably have a coffee without all of us getting under her feet for an hour or so. So I kind of had this like kind of church kind of ish experience growing up. And then as a young person had kind of then drifted to be part of the youth group. And I remember as a young kind of teenager, I was probably like 13, 14. I remember then being with the youth group, being on this camp this summer. And I remember hearing for the first time the gospel message explained to me, the Christian faith explained for me, that Jesus died on a cross for me. That he has made a way for me to come home, to be in relationship with my Father. And I remember like hearing that for the first time, and it was like my heart got set on fire in that moment. It was a homecoming moment for me when I came to faith. It was like my soul found the home it was longing for. And of course, since then, life's not been smooth sailing over the last 30 years of following Jesus. I can still wake up and have that longing in my soul. I've come to realize that is a longing for a home that awaits me. That at the end of my life, when I'm finally home with Jesus and all is well. But I can honestly say that giving my yes to Jesus all those years ago, probably 30 years ago, it was the best decision I ever made. I'm so thankful to God for leading me to find my home in him. Our faith is a homecoming faith. And in fact, that is the central image of the story we're going to look at today in the Bible. The story, you may or may not know it, and that's fine, but it's a story of the prodigal son. And it's one of the many stories that Jesus told, and it's a deeply powerful one that speaks of what does it mean to come home to our Heavenly Father. So we're going to jump in and look at it. If you've got a Bible with you, that's great. We're going to be in Luke 15, 11 to 32. And if not, it's just going to come up behind me. So don't worry. Here we go. So this is Jesus teaching a parable. So Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. His father went out and pleaded with him, but he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" Now, this story is sometimes called the prodigal son or the lost son, which I've got to say is ironic this morning as we managed to lose one of our children this morning. If you saw me running around like a frantic person this morning. The lost son or the prodigal son, but it's actually more accurate to see this story as the story of 2 sons, not just one. There's 2 sons in this story. This is how Jesus starts the story, doesn't it? He has everyone around and then he starts by saying, there was a man who had 2 sons. So this story is actually about a man that had 2 sons. And we hear about the younger one, how he comes to his father and he demands his inheritance early. Because, you're not supposed to get that till you're dead. You're not supposed to, the father has to die first. But no, the son comes to him and says, "Look, I kind of want your stuff, but I don't want you anymore. I am out of here." This son's probably a teenager, takes the money and runs. And he runs to seek out a life of freedom from his perspective. Freedom to do whatever he wants. No longer living under the rules of his father's household. He does what you could imagine most teenagers would do if you gave him a vast sum of money. He goes and wastes it all. He actually lives like a 90s rock star. He goes and spends it all on women and wild living. And then the money runs out, and so does the friends, and he hits rock bottom. He takes a job, we're told, feeding pigs. And so he finds himself, this son, that instead of gaining the freedom that he wanted, he actually finds himself lost and trapped, left feeding pigs, desperately lonely and hungry. Now, kind of feeding pigs aside, this is kind of one of those stories that we hear all the time, or we can watch about or read about all the time, isn't it? Those stories of celebrities or famous people who, whether by their own bad choices that they've made, or whether it's unexpected circumstances that come their way, like the famine, as it is in this story, or maybe both. It like all comes crashing down around them. They had everything, and suddenly they find themselves with nothing. And there's this, often if you hear people tell those kind of stories, there's like this rock bottom moment, isn't there? It's like the feeding the pigs moment. And that often can then be this turning point in someone's life, this life-changing moment. Now, even if we've not lived the rock and roll life, we can still have these points in our own lives, can't we? Where we kind of find ourselves covered in like metaphorical pig poo. Everything has gone wrong. It's all hit the fan. Everything seems to be falling apart. Maybe that's what you're experiencing this morning, one of those moments in life. And the invitation of this story, the invitation from Jesus, is to do what the Son does in this story. It's to listen to your soul's cry and head home. So this is the story of a younger son who finds himself lost and heads back home. But this is also the story of the older son too. Now what you need to realize about this older son is he is also lost. He is also lost, just like his younger brother, but in a different, less obvious, more deadly way. This older son is the kind of person who does the right thing. He stayed home, he's worked hard, maybe he's even had to work even harder because his younger brother skipped town and left him to it. This older son feels owed for his time. He is cross, he is bitter, he is angry, and his heart is hard. Now, it's worth saying that this son that Jesus is talking about was a reference to the religious people in Jesus' day who would have been there in the crowd listening to him. They're often characterized by this kind of superiority that they felt towards other people. And Jesus in this parable is like being really confrontational and saying to them that outwardly you might look great, you might do all the right things, but inwardly you are just as lost as the other son. The older son here is joyless, judgmental, divisive. Kind of in short, what many people think of when they think of religious types today. But that is not what people of faith, that is not what Christians should be like or be known for. So if you're here this morning and that's been your experience, I hope that if you stick around this place, you will see that you are welcome here and that you will encounter people full of deep joy, grace, and generosity, because that is what we have received from Jesus. So this older son is lost as well, but in a different way to his younger brother. So this is a story about two lost sons. But it's also a story about a father. The father and his response to both of his sons. And that is a response of outstretched arms. Outstretched to his younger son, whom he is overjoyed to see come home. And outstretched to his older son as he pleads with him and beckons him to come and join the party. So this is a father with outstretched arms. The father in this story has this big heart and this generosity of spirit. Now, because this story has kind of been titled The Prodigal Son, how we understand what the word prodigal means has kind of shifted over time. Often when we think of the word prodigal, it's kind of become synonymous in our mind with being wayward or absent in some way. That's not what the word prodigal actually means. The word prodigal actually means to be recklessly extravagant. That's what the word prodigal means. So it's the prodigal son because this son has gone and been recklessly extravagant with the inheritance. He's gone and just wasted it all till it runs out. So he is prodigal because he has been recklessly extravagant. But there is another prodigal in this story. Just as there is another son in this story, it's two lost sons in this story, there is another prodigal in this story, the prodigal son, and of course, the prodigal father. There is another prodigal in this story, another person who demonstrates a kind of reckless extravagance, albeit in a very different way to his son. The prodigal father who demonstrates this reckless extravagance to his returning son. This father who sees his sorry-faced son trudging home and he throws aside the cultural norms of the day, where Middle Eastern men of a certain wealth like this, they wouldn't run anywhere. That was totally undignified. Like me, if I try and run on my kids' sports days or something, it just wasn't going to happen. But that is what he does. He's so overjoyed. He sprints out to him and he greets him and he flings his arm around him, it says, and he kisses him, he embraces him. I mean, the father is extravagant in his welcome of his son. He showers him with grace, love, and affection. Can you imagine what that would have been like for the son? I mean, this boy must have been returning home feeling like such a disappointment. I mean, such a loser to go home in such circumstances. Can you imagine how you would feel if that was you? And we're told he's kind of been preparing this rather sad I'm sorry speech. You know, he's been rehearsing it. You can imagine all the way home, this rather pathetic I'm sorry speech. Father, I've sinned against heaven, against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. He's like practicing this speech all the way home. He's ready to encounter his father's anger. He's anticipating the punishment that is rightfully his. Like, I'm going to come and I'm going to work for you as a servant. Dad, I'm no longer worthy to be your son, but let me just work as a servant. It's like, Father, you don't need to even acknowledge me anymore. Just let me come back into your house. And so he's practicing this speech the whole way home, hoping it's enough to kind of put a roof over his head and food in his belly. He's practicing this speech. I think we've all probably had those moments in our lives where we've been practicing an I'm sorry speech, you know, and you're just practicing. This is how I'm going to do it. I just hope it's enough. I hope it's enough. And that's what he's doing. Hoping if we get the apology right, things might be okay. You know, I grew up in a house with divorced parents. My parents got divorced when I was very, very young. And both of them then got remarried. And I grew up with my mum and my stepdad, a man called Alex, alongside of 4 siblings. And then my stepdad also had 2 children from his first marriage, so there was lots of us around. His sons were a bit older than us. And Alex, my stepdad, used to tell this story of an evening involving his eldest son, my eldest stepbrother. And the story was that, so years before, there was this big park at the end of the road where they lived, on the house where they lived, the street where they lived. There's this big park, and my stepdad Alex used to go down there on a kind of warm summer's afternoon and play cricket. And then, like lots of matches of cricket, ended up having a drink in the cricket club afterwards. So my stepdad was at the end of the road in this park playing cricket, having a drink at the end of the cricket match. And so his eldest son, my stepbrother, was left home alone. He was probably about 14, 15. And he had some friends over. And he was trying to impress these friends. So what he did was, now my stepdad used to keep his car in the garage next to the house. So my stepbrother, to show off to his friends, went and got my stepdad's, Alex's car key, and he went and he started the car, just to show that he could. This is like, you know, old school car. We still have a car like this, with a clutch. Oh, yes. And so he thought, I know, I'm going to like move the car up and down in the garage, just like, you know, on the biting point of the clutch. So he starts shifting the car backwards and forwards in the garage. I'm sure his friends were really impressed. And then, of course, presses the accelerator. The car is in reverse, and the car just shoots out the back of the garage. The garage is absolutely destroyed, as is the car. Someone runs up the road to go and get my stepdad, who has just had a drink in the cricket house, goes to get him and bring him home. And my stepbrother, you know, I remember him talking about this story. They were recounting it together. I remember him saying, standing on the pavement outside the house, looking up the road to see my stepdad appear as he came out the park and started walking down the road towards him. He said that was like the scariest moment of his life. Just stood there waiting. I imagine he was practicing his I'm sorry speech as well, hoping that somehow that might be enough. Imagining, anticipating the punishment that was surely going to come his way. Father, I've sinned against you. I'm no longer worthy to be your son. Imagine if my stepdad had just run down the road, if Alex had run down the road, greeted him with a hug and a kiss, disregarded the smashed up car, the destroyed garage doors, and just taken him inside and had a feast. Can you imagine? That isn't what actually happened, I feel like I should say. Although Alex used to say, you know, when he told the story, the look of fear and shame on his eldest son's face as he walked down the road was enough. He knew that he didn't need to punish him too severely. But just imagine if that it was what he had done. That's the equivalent, really, of what happens here in this story Jesus tells. It's outrageous. The prodigal father barely hears his prodigal son out. He doesn't hear him out. Doesn't listen to the I'm sorry speech. Doesn't care. Instead of encountering his father's anger and punishment, he encounters his father's embrace, his kiss, his hug, his shower of affection and joy. It's like extravagant. It is overflowing. It is like just cannot get your head around it. Do you notice how the father in the story, he holds nothing back. He spares nothing in the welcome of his son home. We're told that the best robe is brought out for the son. You imagine his son is probably like covered in like wearing like dirty clothes, probably stinks of pig poop, gross. And the father wraps this cloak around him. It's like in that moment, like transforms him. He stands there as a new man with this cloak wrapped around him. The father puts a ring on him. Now, the signet ring in those days was like a symbol of your authority. It had like a crest on it if you were the leaders of the household, and with that crest you could stamp it onto the wax and whatever, and everyone would know, I'm the person in charge. So to give him this signet ring, it was like showing that the son was now allowed to still act on the father's behalf. That the son has been given back his identity as a son. And all that came with it, the significance and the authority that came with being the father's son. And then we're told that he has sandals put on his feet. Only servants had bare feet in those days. He has sandals. So the son has come back saying, let me be the servant. And the father gives him sandals to show, no, you're not a servant of mine, you are my son. Instead of losing his freedom, he's given his freedom back, a freedom that only comes as a son in that identity. The kind of freedom that only comes from reckless, extravagant grace. And then there's the party. I mean, the extravagant feast. The fatted calf was killed, we're told. Now, that would have been a public event. Like, meat wasn't eaten loads. And this would have been like this whole village affair to kill the fattened calf. You know, the father wants everyone to know. It's not this kind of come in the back door and we'll keep this quiet. He wants everyone to know, everyone to celebrate. The father is so full of exuberant joy. And before you know it, there they all are. They're like feasting, dancing, music. You can imagine the father and the son right in the middle of the dance floor. It's all happening. Imagine how loved that younger son must have felt. I imagine it was breathless. So this is a story of reckless extravagance, of overflowing grace. This is the story of the prodigal father, or as Jesus is wanting us to understand, our prodigal God. This is what God is like, his extravagance of his love for you. He's kinder, more gracious, more full of joy for you than you can imagine. Like his son has come home, there's no holding back on the love or the joy that he feels. And this is the message of our faith. You know, the outstretched arms of the Father become the outstretched arms of Jesus on the cross for us, welcoming us home. He is the way home. His death meant that anything that gets in the way of us and our Father, any of the stuff that we've done, our sin, our brokenness, our bad decisions, our shame, all of it, that we can receive that same welcome home, the extravagant grace that the younger son receives. We can finally be at home. Elsewhere in the New Testament, we're told this, Ephesians 2:13, but now in Christ Jesus, now in King Jesus, you who were once far away have been brought near. You've been brought home by the blood of Christ. Our faith is a homecoming faith. Maybe you're here this morning, and that is that invitation for you this morning is to come home to him today, to receive his extravagant, overflowing love for you. That cloak of grace that covers all the stuff. He wants to cloak you in his righteousness, in his grace today. The Father's ring, a sign of your new identity as his child. And the sandals that show the freedom that comes from faith in Jesus. We'd love to pray for anyone that wants to come home this morning in a minute. For others, maybe for those of us that have been in the Christian faith for a while, it's a different kind of homecoming is the invitation this morning. You know, the truth is that we can, without even meaning to, become like that older son, the party pooper. It's easy to forget the love that God has for you, all that he has for you. It's easy to forget what he's like. John Wimber, who was the first Vineyard pastor, started the Vineyard movement. His aim was to do church for people that didn't do church. And he used to use this analogy. Someone shared this analogy with me this morning. He used to use this analogy about how we can how we can misunderstand what our Father God is like. And he used the analogy of when his grandkids used to come over. He's passed away now, but he shared this story. When his grandkids used to come over, him and his wife, Carol, they would be so excited because they were so excited to have their grandkids over. And they'd get all the toys out, they'd get snacks ready. They would be so excited, just waiting for the knock on the door. And John used to sit in his armchair, ready for them. And then the knock would come on the door, and his wife, Carol, Grandma would go and open the door, and they would come rushing in. And he would say how they would just rush in, and they would be like climbing all over him, pulling on his beard, pulling his ears, jumping up and down for joy. They were so excited to see him as well. And then John would share, can you imagine if when my grandkids came in through the door and down the hall, they came in where I was sitting and said, Granddad, what jobs do you want me to do for you? It's like, can you imagine how much that would break my heart? And yet over time, as people of faith, that's exactly what we can do. We start to feel like Father God is the person we come towards and say, right, God, what do you want me to do for you? How do I serve you? I'm slaving away in that field for you. And the invitation for all of us is not to be outside of the party, to get in, to enjoy that extravagant love that God has for us. We don't want to misunderstand our Father. We don't want to miss his extravagant heart. We don't want to graduate past this story, the story of the prodigal father, our prodigal God, and find ourselves on the outside of the party, outside of the joy, outside of the extravagance of our Father's love and grace. I feel like the world is fed up of meeting Christians who look like the older son. Sour-faced, mean, judgmental. That is not our story. We are to be transformed by his extraordinary, extravagant grace towards us, that we would find our home in him, our acceptance, our significance, our love, our belonging in him, and to welcome the world home to faith in Jesus.